I'm 68 years old, and I did something 3 years ago that made my own children stop speaking to me for 6 months. My sister called me shameless. My neighbor, a woman I'd known for 40 years, crossed the street to avoid me at the grocery store. And you know what? I would do it all over again, because what I did saved my life. And I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, because I think you need to hear this. I think someone out there is living the life I almost accepted, and I refuse to let that happen to you. My name is Gloria. I was married to my husband Richard for 43 years. 43 years of shared meals, shared beds, shared silences. He was a good man, not perfect, but good. He worked at the same manufacturing plant for 31 years. He never missed a mortgage payment. He coached our son's Little League team until his knees gave out. And on a Tuesday morning in April, 3 years ago, he kissed me on the forehead, told me he'd pick up milk on the way home, and never came back. Massive heart attack in the parking lot of the hardware store. He was dead before the ambulance arrived. The first year after Richard died, I did what widows are supposed to do. I wore black. I visited his grave every Sunday. I learned how to pay bills online and fix the garbage disposal myself. I sat in our living room surrounded by 43 years of photographs and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. My daughter Karen called me every night. My son Michael came over every weekend to mow the lawn. Everyone told me I was doing so well, so strong, such a trooper. And I believed them. I thought grief had a finish line and I was crossing it. But here's what nobody tells you about being a widow at 65. The loneliness doesn't come all at once. It creeps in slowly, like water through a crack in the foundation. You don't notice it until suddenly you're drowning. I started talking to the television, not just commenting on the news, but having full conversations with game show hosts. I set 2 places at the dinner table by habit and then stared at the empty chair until my food went cold. I stopped sleeping in our bedroom because the bed felt too big. I moved to the guest room, then to the couch, then to the recliner in the living room where I'd fall asleep with the TV on just to hear another human voice. One day, my friend Marlene, who I'd known since our kids were in diapers together, she looked at me and said something that changed everything. She said, "Gloria, you're not living. You're just waiting to die." And I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to tell her she didn't understand, that this was just how things were now, that I was fine. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out, because she was right. Marlene was the one who suggested the dance class, a ballroom dancing class at the community center Tuesday and Thursday evenings. I told her she was crazy. I told her I had 2 left feet. I told her Richard and I never danced, not even at our wedding. She signed me up anyway and drove me there herself because she knew I'd find an excuse not to go. And that's where I met Walter. Walter was 72, a retired high school history teacher with a white beard and kind eyes and absolutely no rhythm whatsoever. He stepped on my feet 3 times in our first dance. He apologized each time like he'd committed a crime. By the 4th time, I was laughing so hard I had tears in my eyes. Real tears, happy tears, the first ones in over a year. We started having coffee after class, then dinner, then phone calls that lasted for hours, talking about everything and nothing at all. He told me about his wife Margaret, who'd passed 4 years earlier from cancer. He told me about how he'd sold their house because he couldn't stand walking past her garden every day. He told me about the guilt he felt for still being alive when she wasn't. And I told him things I'd never told anyone, not even Richard. 3 months later, Walter asked me on a real date. Dinner at a nice restaurant, the kind with cloth napkins and candles on the table. I said yes. And I made the mistake of telling my daughter. Karen's reaction is something I'll never forget. She didn't yell, that would have been easier. Instead, her voice went cold, the way it did when she was a teenager and I'd done something that embarrassed her. She said, "Mom, Dad's only been gone for 16 months. She said, "What will people think?" She said, "Don't you have any respect for his memory?" I tried to explain. I told her I wasn't replacing her father. I told her I was lonely. I told her that 16 months of waking up alone in an empty house was an eternity when you didn't know how much time you had left. She hung up on me. The next day, my son called and told me that Karen was upset, and maybe I should think about how my choices were affecting the family. As if my happiness was a threat to them. As if my decision to have dinner with a kind man who made me laugh was somehow a betrayal of everything we'd built together. I went on the date anyway, and it was wonderful. Walter brought me flowers, yellow roses, because I'd mentioned once that they were my favorite. He pulled out my chair. He asked me questions and actually listened to the answers. He told me I looked beautiful, and for the first time in years, I felt like I might be. We've been together for 3 years now. Walter moved into my house last spring. We sleep in the master bedroom, in the bed I couldn't even look at for a year after Richard died. We have breakfast together every morning. We take walks in the evening. We argue about what to watch on television and whose turn it is to do the dishes. We're building a life together, a real life, not just waiting for the end. My daughter didn't speak to me for 6 months after I told her Walter was moving in. My son came around faster, but things were strained. My sister told me I was making a fool of myself, that people our age should have more dignity. And you know what? I let them have their opinions. I stopped trying to justify my choices. Because here's what I learned at 68, that I wish I'd known at 38. Other people's discomfort with your happiness is not your problem to solve. Let me tell you something about widowhood that no one prepared me for. Society has a script for grieving wives, and that script has an expiration date on joy. You're allowed to be sad forever. You're allowed to light candles on his birthday and cry at songs that remind you of him. But happiness? New love? That makes people uncomfortable. It challenges their idea of what loyalty looks like. It forces them to confront their own fears about loss and moving on. But here's what my children didn't understand, what my sister couldn't see. Loving Walter doesn't mean I stop loving Richard. I carry Richard with me every single day. I talk to him sometimes, in my head, when I'm cooking dinner or folding laundry. I tell him about Walter, and I like to think he'd approve. Richard was a practical man. He wouldn't have wanted me to spend my remaining years as a monument to his memory. He would have wanted me to live, and that's exactly what I'm doing. If you're listening to this and you're alone, whether you're widowed or divorced or just never found the right person, I want you to hear me. You are not too old for love. You are not too old for companionship. You are not too old to start something new. The world will tell you to sit down, be quiet, wait for the end gracefully. The world is wrong. My granddaughter, who's 26 and thinks she invented independence, she told me last Christmas that I was her hero. She said, "Grandma, you showed me that it's never too late to choose yourself." That conversation meant more to me than any approval from my daughter ever could, because that's the legacy I want to leave. Not the grieving widow who did everything right, but the woman who refused to let other people's expectations define her final chapters. I'm 71 now. Walter is 75. We don't know how much time we have left. Nobody does. But I can tell you this with absolute certainty. These past 3 years have been some of the happiest of my entire life. Not because Walter is perfect. He snores, he leaves his socks on the floor, and he cannot for the life of him remember to replace the toilet paper roll. But because I chose to keep living. I chose connection over isolation. I chose possibility over the safe comfort of grief. So here's my advice, and I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm asking you to think about it. If there's something you want, something that would make your life fuller, something that would bring you joy, and the only thing stopping you is what other people might think, ask yourself this. Will those people be there at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep? Will they hold your hand in the hospital? Will they make you laugh until your stomach hurts? If the answer is no, then their opinions don't get a vote. Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one of them. Walter and I sit together in the evenings, and he reads them to me, and we talk about all of you like your family, because in a way, you are. You're the people who understand that life doesn't end when the world expects it to. If this meant something to you, subscribe. Do it for the person you're going to be in 5 years, in 10 years. Give that version of yourself a reminder that it's never too late. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, maybe a friend who's been alone too long, maybe a parent who's forgotten how to live, share this with them. Do it today. Don't wait until it's too late. My name is Gloria. I'm 71 years old, and I'm not done yet. Not even close.